Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. This is Ann Mitchell. Ann Mitchell, I can't even pronounce my own name today. I'm also Ancestry Anne here at Ancestry.com, and today I am here to talk to you about creating timelines to better understand records and families. We've had a few requests for this, and I was delighted to be able to talk to you about this because I think this is a really simple tool that you can build that will help you understand a little bit better how to guide your research and how to get the most out of it. So let's begin. Translating records into timelines can help you identify when and where events happen. It's really hard when you're looking at individual records or a person page to really see all that in context, especially when you're trying to bring the whole family together. It helps you know where to look for other records. As you look at how the timeline is laid out, it helps you understand better where you should be looking. It helps you understand your ancestor in relationship to their family. People lived in families. They lived in neighborhoods. If you know what's happening to the people around them, it helps you better understand what was going on in their life. One second here, I do want to check for something. All right, just want to make sure everyone could hear me. It looks like they can, so without further ado. All right, so every record can be translated into a timeline, usually with more than one date. Often we look at a marriage record or a birth record or a death record and it's got one day, right? We're interested in that one event. But you're probably missing something if you don't actually record everything on here. Let's look at this one for James Bryant. And I'm just going to use James Bryant as an example today. We know their marriage date, and it was down here, 8 October 1874, but it also gives us the birth date of these two people. Oh, that's useful information. And it very nicely also tells us the birth location. Again, great information. So how do we build a timeline? Everyone customizes a timeline to suit their own needs, but I recommend you start with something really simple. And once you start messing around with this, you'll find ways that you make it your own. But in every event, you probably want date and location because when and where something happened, obviously, you need that in a timeline. Information from the record. And then I also have a little section for thoughts and comments. These are things I need to do, things I wonder about, just to keep track of my own notes so that I don't have to go back and do it later. You can use Excel, Word, or any other program that allows you to type in text and modify it. I use Word. Everybody has their own way of doing this. Evernote, OneNote, there are all sorts of different programs you can use. But the concept is the same. Let me show you in Word real quickly how to build this. So, open up a Word document or any other word processing document. Figure out where you're going to add a table in. So, over here on Insert, we can click on Table. And this one I'm just going to build a 3x8 table because I need 3 columns, date and location, information, thoughts and comments. I label my columns, put them in bold because that's what I like to do. And some people like to start color coding things. Whatever makes you happy, whatever makes the information pop for you, that's what you need to do. Then I save it in I just name it whoever I'm creating a timeline for. You might put their birth date and death date in there, whatever helps you organize your information. All right, so let's go back to the marriage record. How would you enter in this information? First, I do this chronologically because people live chronologically. Susan Stanfield, and I left a D out there, was born in 1852 in Fleming County, Kentucky. And I write down the source. Now, it depends on how you want to do your sources. If you want to do your sources full-blown, as you would do out of evidence explained, you could put it in here. If you just want to give yourself a note of what kind of record and source it somewhere else, that's fine too. But I would put where I find this information so when you go back and you need to verify, you know where it came from. 1853, we know that James was born in Bath, Kentucky. Bath County, Kentucky, sorry. So write that down. And I know that they were living in Robertson County, Kentucky, and that's where they were married. So James and Susan are married. They were living in Robertson at the time and were married there. Source. And then I put the data collection that I got it from, Kentucky Marriage Records, 1852, 1914, Ancestry.com. Whatever you want to do, right? Just these are suggestions. All right, so thoughts and to-dos. So what have I learned from this that I want to not keep in my head, but keep on paper so I can remember to do this? All right, so over here, I need to look for Susan's birth record in Fleming, right? Because we were told she is there, so that's a to-do. Look for James's birth record in Bath, Kentucky, because that's where it says he's from. I can look for the couple for the first time in the 1880 U.S. Census. They'll be living with their families, most probably, in 1870 and not together. So that's a demarcation line. I'm just going to put a list of things that I know I need to go look for. Always make sure you save after you add every line. I cannot tell you the number of times I have forgotten to save something in a document. Something went wrong and then I had to type it all in again. That makes me cranky. I pass that along to hopefully prevent it for you. So let's go back and look at James in 1860. Census records are a rich timeline. Any census record just lays out so many different dates for you because you have birth dates and prospective marriage dates and movement dates. So just looking at this, and this one is really hard to read, but you just have to trust me. 1793, Robert Bryant, born in Virginia. Make sure that you take a notice of those birthplaces. 1850, and his mother's name is really Maria McCollum, born in Ohio, but of course it's listed as Maria Bryant here. 1842, his sister was born. 1845, his brother was born. Both were born in Virginia. 1848 through 1858, 3 more brothers and sisters, and they were all born in Kentucky. All right, so that's the information we're going to start with here. All right, so here I am. I add in father, mother, sisters, and brothers. Now it's interesting, if you start to look down this dates and location, this is not just the timeline, but this is movement through a map. You could go plot these points on a map and show how they had moved around. Now again, you don't have specific towns and counties here, but as you get that information, you could start to add that in. And that, excuse me, becomes a very useful way to look at movement across a country. Now I didn't add in a bunch of thoughts and to-dos here, though you might actually want to do that. But I do want to show you something else that you need to analyze and look and add into your timeline. And this will help you find more records. From looking at your timeline, you can infer certain events. Generally, people were married before the birth of their oldest child. From the 1860 record, we see that Melinda, as far as we know, is the oldest child. So I'm going to put, and I put this in italics because I don't really know, probably 2 to 3 years earlier, 1839 to 1841, Robert and Maria are married. Melinda was born in Virginia, so that's the first place to look for a birth record, or excuse me, a marriage record. Need to check the 1850 census to make sure she's the oldest child. She may not be, and if I go back to the 1850, that will help me figure out exactly when their oldest child was born and when they probably got married. This is a really good clue to verifying, because you can sometimes, if you have real common names, Ancestry will suggest marriage records from different states, and you may have no idea which one is even right or which one to examine. But if you've looked at it and made some good assumptions and guesses, it will help you verify what you're looking for. And then as you add that information in, you get rid of your assumption in the italics and you can put in the actual information. Changes in location for birthplace suggest movement. Don't just assume you're going to remember that, write that in. 1845 to 1848, moved from Virginia to Kentucky, based on birthplaces of William and Augustine. Why is that important? Now, we don't have a lot of deed records on our site, but if people are moving, they may be selling property, they may have inherited property in the place that they're moving to. This is really important for finding those types of documents. It also shows you that it's a change of pace for the family. Also, in really large families, and they often were in the 1800s, some children will be left behind as they move from state to state because they're older, they're married, they have lives that are already established. These are things that you want to watch for as you go to search for people. Also, if you know a general time period in which the family lived there, that tells you where to look for documents in a certain time. If they moved to Kentucky in 1845, finding a census record for them in 1840 probably is not accurate. Historical events add context. We all know the Civil War happened between 1861 and 1865. What did that mean for this family? William was probably old enough to have served, possibly Augustine. Doubtful Robert was. Actually, if you've read some of my Civil War columns, you know that Robert did actually fight, which is an interesting story within itself. But if you put in these big historical and statewide historical contexts, it gives you clues on where else to look. You know that you're going to want to investigate some of the Civil War history for this family and what it meant to the family. And then you can just read through your timeline and it's all there. Let's add in another census and see what it does. I chose, just for example, the 1880 census. And remember, as you add every census in, you're just going to get more and more information. This one, again, is hard to read, but it appears that James and Susan have had 3 children, Minerva, Joseph, and William. So we can put in their birth dates and where they were born. They were all born in Kentucky. I cut that off that image, but that's where that is. You'll see that James is also living with his brother Stephen and his mother Maria. The father is not shown here. That means that he may have died. Also, a nephew, Charles Stanfield. We know Susan's last name is Stanfield. So, is that a relative of hers? This is something to investigate. So let's look at how we put that in the timeline. First, I'm going to add in James's 3 children, Minerva, Joseph, and William. Now, I didn't put a to-do, but I probably should put in a to-do to go look for their birth certificates. This will also give me more information, help solidify that they are in fact the children of James and Susan Bryant. Just lay all this stuff out and you'll start to build it. You can also copy pieces of this then. Once you start building, say, a timeline for Joseph, you can create a timeline for him and just start copying pieces that are relevant to him. I also enumerate the actual census event. James and Susan are living with their 3 children. Also in the house is James's mother and younger brother, Stephen, and a nephew, Charles F. Stanfield. So over here in my to-dos and comments, this implies Robert Bryant died before 1880. When? So this is something to go investigate. Was he in the 1870 census? I have to go track that down. Were there death certificates that I can find? And who is Charles Stanfield? How is he related? Is that related to the Civil War? Where are his parents? Is he just living to help out with this family? Another thing to go solve. You're not going to be able to solve it immediately, but if you put it in your to-do list or over in your thoughts and comments, just anything you observe or find interesting, when you go back and you reread this, you're like, oh yeah, I need to figure that out. You don't have to remember it, and then you can go do it. I also put down here Mason County, Kentucky, because that's where the census was taken. So I know that they were married in Robertson County, but in 1880 they're living in Mason County. So that would also, you'd probably want to go in and add your to-dos here. Were Minerva, Joseph, and William born in Robertson or Mason? Where do I look for their birth certificates? Those are usually stored on a county-wide basis. But at least it gives you a couple places to look, and if there are multiples of any given name, it gives you an idea of which one may be right. Write down the clues, write down everything you can find, and it will really help you as you're trying to figure out what's what. Another thing, this one doesn't imply as much. I don't have specific death dates, but it's really interesting to figure out how old someone was when their parents died, or a child died, or a sibling died. It gives you context in their life of what was happening. These are really traumatic events that happen in our own personal lives. Knowing when they happened to our ancestors gives you context. If they were young, it probably had a huge effect on their life. These are really important. Also, when you go back further in time, families that tended to have a lot of children die wasn't uncommon, but it was also a sign of not as much money, not good health, these kind of things. Families who had large families and everyone tended to live, not only did they possess good genetics, they were probably better off. They probably had better food, they had better, they were better able to take care of their children. So that also tells you about some of their relationship in life. So just write down everything. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just start to gather all your thoughts and ideas, and then you can read through the timeline and better understand your ancestors' lives. I'd be really interested if some of you have different ways of doing this. If you would send me at askancestry.com and put timeline in the subject, or if you've come up with other clues, because I would love to share those in one of my columns, or maybe do a different presentation. Another thing that people do, and I don't have it an example of that here is they color code things. Births, they put in one color, marriage in one color, deaths in another color. That way it's very easy to traverse the list and see exactly what's happening. Or you could put a little picture in some of these. Whatever makes it easier for you to understand. Start simple and adjust as you go. Hope this one was helpful. I find this the most useful tool in organizing my thoughts. Make sure you're looking for our upcoming events. This is the one we did today, creating timelines to better understand records and families. Krista, our barefoot genealogist, is down in Southern California at the Genealogy Jamboree. She will be doing a live Twitter Friday at 9 a.m. I believe is that really East Coast time? Please check the events page. It looks like it is. No, that is Mountain Time. So that would be at 11 a.m. East Coast time, 8 a.m. West Coast time. On next Thursday, we have all sorts of data collections that don't have an index. I'll give you some pointers on how to search those. It's a lot of work, but usually it's worth the effort. Then also we have upcoming, Krista has a tweet chat. We'll look at using Ancestry.com member profiles. And this is one that's been very requested, and I wanted to point it out to y'all. My Canvas and other ideas for publishing your family history. People are always asking, how do I write my family history? Krista is going to give you some great ideas and tips on how to do that. I would not miss that one. Hope this has been helpful. As always, I enjoyed talking to you all. See you next time.